All right, YouTube, it's been a while, but back doing another live stream, this one a little bit different. This is actually a console that was submitted. Well, this is just the board, but we have the whole console over and off to the left. This is for an Xbox One X. A client submitted it and said that it wasn't working. At the time, I was unaware that the client actually purchased this machine off of eBay, and it was described to them as functional and working. However, when they received it, the only thing it would do is turn on, and that was to a black screen of death. Now, there's a lot of different information out there about these black screens, what causes them, potential fixes behind them, and yes, in some cases, it can be the HDMI retimer or the encoder, whatever you like to call it. I believe this chip is actually named the retimer by its manufacturer. And it kind of just proxies and sorts those signals. And as you can see, these traces run from the HDMI through that retimer, and they loop around, down, and into this area here. Now, I have not yet removed the APU from an Xbox One X, so I'm not sure to which contact points these connect to. But with this particular machine, it showed signs of having drop damage and potentially even some burn damage, which I have no idea how the case would have been melted from the outside, especially at its location. It just, and maybe it's just significant drop damage if an impact is so intense on these plastics that, I mean, obviously bending and stretching at a high rate of speed is going to result in some type of thermal energy. So maybe that's where it gets this melted glow from. But let's see if we can show that. That is this. Look at that. And it has that kind of melted plastic glow to it, but that is one serious dent. And similar with all Xboxes that precede it, and I don't know if it's an issue with the X-clamp. In my opinion, yes, it is. I think the X-clamp could be designed better, because it appears that in every Xbox that takes a significant drop and fall, and this even goes back as far as the Xbox 360, is that you're going to get this weird kind of contortion to the board. However, on this particular board, it does have a warping. It's a slight bow this way, but it's so even and so uniform that it looks like it may be a product of, maybe this was a day one launch where a lot of people had these issues, and that issue may be related to a uneven reflow. Well, when they initially, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a reflow because it's being done the first time, but maybe they do still call it that. Anyways, to get back on topic, when they build these machines out in the factory, the way that they mass produce them is they've got a machine that picks in places, and then it gets put on some type of a support device, and it gets sent down a little conveyor belt assembly line, and it walks down that line and goes through multiple stages of this heat ramp up cycling to allow the components to adhere using the solder that's been applied to the board. And it allows everything to kind of get soldered at once. And they do so within a very controlled environment that should prevent this warping from happening. But a lot of times, manufacturers tend to rush things, and they get a need to hit a deadline, and they don't take enough time before they send it out to the public. And I'm not sure if it's going to be visible through this camera, so we may try using the microscope, but you can actually see it, even just that. The whole, it's a very slight warp and bend, but there is one on this board. And that to me makes me think, it was an initial oven. If it was drop fall, usually we see those become a little bit more dramatic, but the shape of this board is very different from traditional Xbox boards, which are more square. Now we have this big section that's been cut out for the battery. Sorry, not battery, the power supply. I believe that's where the power supply went. In fact, yes, I'm almost positive. But anyways, again, the shape of this board is different from the others, where they were more complete rectangles. This now has cutouts through it, which almost is very reminiscent of a PlayStation model. This may contribute to why the unevenness works the way it does, because most of our force is right here, and it does seem to be that the bowing is right here. So maybe it wasn't manufacturer processes and it was all drop fall. But this board, to be considered flat, needs pressure against this area, and it just flattens out the way that it should be. And the problem with that is that it's very noticeable that the edges of the processor chip are lifted away from the board, and they may or may not be making contact on all planes. But as this heats up, as it is being used or whatever is the case, heat and cooling of this could cause those connections to become intermittent or have broken completely. If you have an intermittent connection, it may have pretty much killed something off. Now, usually when you do have something blow in there, it would shut down the system completely, but it would have to short to ground to do that. So when we have an issue like this, it creates an interesting opportunity for something internally to go bad that could be a failure on the GPU side. And they don't do this anymore, but you will see still the pattern. It used to be labeled, I believe, on the original Xbox One, and it was on the underside. And let's see if they have it here. I do not see it. It was labeled GPU and CPU because, again, now they're using these combo chips which do both functions inside of one device. And having it labeled was really nice because then at least you knew that they were basically just splitting the chip down the middle almost, because these lines that come this way and then come this way, they split. And I'm sure here we have lines that intersect and go other ways, so those may serve other purposes. We don't really have the documentation, and without spending countless hours of probing, it would be almost impossible to just assume what is going on underneath. But we do at least know that on this side over here, we've got CPU and APU, probably some type of power management. And if our GPU, CPU and GPU, I might have said a different acronym, but if our GPU side is not getting power, or maybe not getting all the power that it needs, would the machine boot? Would it shut down? Or would it do what it's doing where it's booting up, it's going to where it needs to, but when you turn it on, you get nothing but a black screen. And it is connected. The system shows that it has some sort of a connection with the device. The handshake is taking place between HDMI. The retimer has been tested. It has not been replaced, but this retimer was tested, and all of its diode checks spec out to what a working board would have. So we're pretty safe to assume that this isn't the issue. Our issue is more than likely somewhere under here. Now, there is also the possibility that the hard drive could have a problem. There are times where software, firmware, whatever is getting corrupted in that hard drive through the update process, and it does also result in black screens of death that need to be sorted out. However, usually you can get some function of a menu out of them. You can press the eject and the power button and you get to somewhere. This one you get nothing. So again, I don't think that's the issue. I've also pulled the hard drive. I've connected it to a Windows computer and everything looks to check out there. It doesn't throw any errors. It doesn't say anything's need to be corrected. I then connected it to a Linux machine where I have some drive repair software, and I've tested that hard drive on that. And again, no significant errors, nothing that would suggest that the hard drive is the problem. For all intents and purposes, it appears to be going through its initial boot without any problems whatsoever. But once it's up and running, it should then start to kick out a display to the screen, and it does not. We get the black screen of death. So my assumption again is that our problem is here. And I want to try to see, can we show this in this camera? And I don't think it's going to do it justice. So we are going to attempt with the microscope. All right, so I'm pulling this a little bit forward just so that I can try to get a better focus on can almost see it. I'm going to try to raise this up a little. Let's go ahead and switch over so you all can see what I'm looking at. Let's go to scope only. It helps if I turn that on. All right, oh, there it goes. Let's switch back. I didn't think it was going to click in without me coming out and going back. All right, so we've got to get this in focus now. And actually, that does show up better than I thought. You can see it right there, and it's very clear and evident that there is a lifted edge here, and it's not the actual edge of the APU. It is the edge, let's use these tweezers here so my fingers don't get in the way of seeing it. It is the edge of the board which is turning down at this endpoint, and it's doing the same thing on the other endpoint. And your only clue to this is the difference in spacing between the center line and the edge line. In fact, on this one, it looks like it's closer to it than it should be. I think when I originally looked at it, I looked at it this way. And we're back to being out of focus. Let's see what gets us in. Bear with me as we adjust. Almost there. Okay, so again, you can see that dip. And this dip, I mean, it looks ever so slight, and you wouldn't think this matters, but it does. These should be very, very straight. And what do we have over here? We've got a little bit of lift, not as much as we see on that side, and on that one edge, we saw even more. And this is definitely just not going to show up because it takes us too high out of view. But no, you can still see a bit of lift there. If we could look down at this straight, you would see more of the curvature of this. But unfortunately, there's just not enough gap for us to show it as well as it could. But that is my suspicion, is that this APU stopped making the connection that it needed to. It's got just enough to boot and go through all of its features, or all of its boot up diagnostics, so to speak, but it doesn't have enough to generate a display screen, and that's where it's getting stuck. So if we go back to our overhead view, let's see if there's anything else to look at on this. Again, HDMI was tested, no shorts, no diode readings that suggest that something is leaking voltage or is open in a channel that it shouldn't be, or a pathway that it shouldn't be. Could it be something else causing this issue? Well, I doubt highly that it would be things like RAM, because again, I would put money on it that all of that is checked during boot up to determine whether or not it has the ability to access and drive its RAM the way that it needs to. And that's checking out, otherwise it wouldn't go into a boot phase. We also have, I would expect us to get some type of an error light of some sort, if not even a shutdown after it catches on that. Power management, it is very possible that it could be a power management chip, which I believe Again, I have to do more diagnostic and some confirmation, but I'm pretty sure that these chips over here are in some of these. I think especially this one. I also need to look at what this chip specifically is doing. And like I said, I haven't gone into the Xbox One X as much because out of the devices that we've got, most of those have still been in warranty. So we try and make attempts to get people through without having to send that device out to get warranty work done. But we don't want to crack that seal until we know it's absolutely necessary, and that's their preferred route, so that the manufacturer just doesn't give any grief about warranty claims. This particular device obviously has no warranty, so we popped it open, and I happen to be just free enough on what we call the hot mess desk area that we could do a video highlighting what's going on here for everyone's benefit. So if you're running into an issue with a black screen of death, the two things that I would probably recommend you to look at, and I wouldn't just throw money at it, I would test and probe it, are your HDMI retimer. If it specs out, your HDMI, all of that is good, then start looking in the next direction. Take a look at if you're having that constant boot loop issue, you may be looking at an issue where the and I'm doing the power area like that's like it applies. It may be an issue with the hard drive. Maybe the update files in that got corrupted because it was interrupted during an update. And there are ways to fix that. However, they often tend to be difficult. So if you're not somebody that is seasoned in how to install or upgrade a hard drive, and simply you could, I probably wouldn't recommend it. I would use a different hard drive just in case that's not your issue and it does not solve the problem. And rather than screwing up your old hard drive, you still have something to go back to. But you could try setting up a separate hard drive using the hard drive reinstall tools that are out there and available free and open online. The next issue, if both of those fail, if it's not your retimer, if it's not your hard disk drive, you're looking at something board level. And if your machine comes on and shuts right back off, then you pretty much know you got something board level going on. That's usually an indication of a short on the board. It could be a failure in your power supply and you need to replace it. But if you replace the power supply and it still goes right back to shutting off, and you know that power supply is good, you definitely got an issue on your board, and you have to figure out where it is and if you can address it. If you can't figure out where it is, then there's definitely no way you're going to be able to address it. But if you can find the issue, and the first way to do this is to use your eyes and to use your common sense and look at the board for issues that look to be prevalent. And that could be chips that look burned, that could be chips that have holes blown in the top of them. Yes, that has happened before, and it actually happens more often than people think. So use your eyes to see if anything stands out as bad, but it might not be so obvious as a hole blown out. It might just be a very kind of dulled, maybe a bit of kind of a smoky look to it. Really, if you suspect a chip, look at the board area around it and see if there are indications of any types of problems, such as a browning or a smoke to the board. In fact, I had one where there was a blown Ethernet, and it was a surge that came in, and it actually blew out several different components. However, you could see that it was a bad shock that pushed through because there was an explosion smoke all around the outer edges, and when you removed it and lifted it up, it was just from the center all the way out. There was this circle kind of starburst patch of soot where that electrical discharge exited from that port. And there are fault protections in here for events like that, but again, you can get huge levels of energy spikes, you can get small energy spikes, and if those energy spikes exceed the tolerances of your protection, then it's just going to push past and move forward to the next item in line. I like to call them stop gates. Imagine there's like a little man there standing in front of a gate saying, "You shall not pass." And if you're a big enough bully, you slap that man in the face and you keep on moving. And that's what strong electrical currents are. They're the bullies of your device, and they will push their way past those gates until they've either been diluted enough from pushing past, or they find a path that they prefer to ground and they just go ahead and quit doing what they're doing, or you get a gate that is big enough and strong enough to stop them altogether in their tracks. And a huge lightning strike, a major surge of energy, you're probably not going to find anything on a small, I mean, these are micro, macro components on here, except for things like chips and speakers and caps and inductors and coils and other things that are going on. For the most part, though, you've got a ton of protection that is in that 08012 package size, 0402. I don't think it goes too much lower than that, but yes, there are smaller packages. Most of those usually reside in your phone electronics, but they're starting to work their way into these console devices just because it's more and more stuff being crammed into smaller and smaller spaces with every iteration and upgrade. So again, I think that addresses the majority of paths that you could proceed. On this particular one, we're not advancing forward until the client has a chance to try to dispute through eBay to see if there's a chance to get a refund on this device. If they can't get a refund, then obviously he has the option to do one of two things, and that's either eat his losses or try to repair it. And if it can be repaired, he's probably going to be at the cost of a new Xbox One X, because I believe he said he paid $300 for this one on eBay. You add in the cost of a major repair of pulling off this APU, securing the device, doing preheating to make sure that all moisture is out of the board. First, before we go to reapply the board, we need to straighten it and make sure that it's nice and even, and then have a support structure behind it that is going to make sure that it does not flex and warp in the reflow process of putting down a new, fresh, well, same chip, but freshly BGA reballed. However, even that, if this chip was damaged, is not going to fix it. And when you deal with intermittent issues, you do have the risk of damage existing on the chip. And that damage could have been caused by the fact that, let's say, one of these components on these warp sides is just kind of kissing its contact point. Or maybe it's got cracks in it, and those cracks, are, as it heats and cools, are coming in and out of contact with each other. Well, when that's happening, it's causing that connection to pulse. And machines don't like when they detect intermittent connections, so they start trying to compensate. And that compensation could be an overheat, it could be the system just pushing past its tolerances because it's working based off of a resistance level, and if that resistance increases or decreases, it could be the difference between too much or too little current versus just the right amount, and it goes through whatever microcircuitry is inside of this chip and blows out that area altogether, and it will never function again. And if that is the case, we could reball this until the end of days, and it will never come back to life. The only way to fix that would be to replace it. Unfortunately, we don't have access to these chips to replace. The only way to replace it would be to find another equally broken board and pull not only this chip from it, but there is also a chip in the disk drive that we would have to get that matches. And I have to check on this because it's been a while since we've done Xboxes with a full swap where it's been worthwhile for the customer to do it. But there is certainly going to be some type of onboard NOR chip that has system files and what we call part of the marrying package chip. On PlayStation, that can be anywhere from 3 to 4 chips. On Xbox, I believe it is 3 chips in total. This one, your chip for your Blu-ray, as well as you need the system firmware chip where everything is stored on the board level. And I'm trying to see if anything stands out as that particular chip without going through a microscope and looking for its exact. Now, there is something that I meant to check. I don't think, and like I said, we don't often get to open up the 1X because it's just too new to have a bunch of them coming through with board level events that need to be resolved. Where's my path at? I'm looking for here. I was trying to see if that looked like maybe something had been pulled off, but no, everything there looks like it's been sealed and coated. So I'm pretty sure that this is not supposed to have any package on top of it. But again, getting this from a third party, I would probably need to pull up a board spec sheet for this, somebody that's taken one apart that they knew worked took a picture and threw it down there. And if anyone in the CSRA has one that they want opened up and the inside's taken a picture of, feel free to bring it by. We'll put new thermal paste on it for you and do so at no charge, just to get a good screenshot image of the top and the bottom so that we can have that as a point of reference for future Xbox One X repairs. Again, you need to be in the CSRA. I'm not going to ship a package back to somebody, so if you can't meet with me in person and pick it back up in person, then please don't send your Xbox. Now, the last and final note here is that, again, we're looking at something APU related. And this is where I lost my train of thought for a second, but if I could finalize this conversation on one note, it would be that my theory is that most of these Xbox One X problems, where you have the black screen of death, where nothing else takes care of it, you're looking at an APU issue. And I could almost bet to say that if anything other than your device turns on, it goes into the reinstallation of the files and gives you that error 101. If you're getting any other black screen issue than that, where you are actually able to pull up the installation menu, then you are more than likely looking at a problem with your APU. Even if you get to that area, you may still have a problem with your APU, and for that I will reference another repair that we had for this one where it was still under warranty. We did not pop the seals. We sent the owner of it back to his retailer so that he could try to pursue the warranty route. Not sure yet if he was successful for that, and if not, I'm sure he'll come back to get it worked on. However, his machine was interesting in the sense that it would turn on. You would get the update screen. You could go in and do an update, and it would get almost all the way through the update, and then the screen would go black, and it wouldn't come back. You just have a black screen now. Nothing fixes the issue. However, if you shut down the machine, walk away from it for, I don't know, an hour, 2, 3, I probably at that point was leaving it for maybe 3 to 4 hours, allow the machine to cool down and get back to room temperature, and then turn the machine back on, and guess what? It would pick up where it left off or ask you to reinstall the update file again. It would get almost all the way through that, and then again the screen would go black. And I repeated this process 3 times in order to just say, you know, it wasn't a rare fluke. It was confirmed that every single time it would follow these steps and measures. It would always have this exact same cause and effect. And the cause is that as the machine heated up and got to a certain temperature, that something internally went awry that caused the machine to fully function but could no longer display an image, which is the problem we're having here. So it almost appears that Xbox has in their boot check diagnostic, whatever you want to call it, it has the ability to separate some board level port or APU related issues and continue to stay in an always on constant state, but it can't render an image giving you that full-on black screen of death. But at some level, there is some type of a handshake taking place, because I'm pretty sure that the screen does not say no display. It actually sensed that there was a display connected, but it just wasn't being fed any image, which is kind of the inverse of what you get with PlayStation. But a similar problem is if you have a board level failure where it got past its initial boot but wasn't able to progress to the next phase, you get what's called the constant blue light of death. And that constant blue light of death is more often than not an issue with the APU. It's an issue with something else. Because if there's an APU issue, it usually wants to shut down. But that's not to say that's always the case. So typically, a boot check should reveal if you have a major issue and then cause the machine to shut down. If it's shutting down immediately the second you click the power, you know you've got a short to ground somewhere on this device. But if you get what I just described, which is your black screen with nothing else, or it boots up for a little while and then goes to black screen, and it feels slightly warmer than normal at rest, but doesn't really spin the fan up, nor does it feel like it's kicking out an enormous amount of heat, but it did seem more heated than normal in the case where it would kind of slowly coast into the black screen. My assumption is that this is our problem, and it's either internally failed or it is a problem with either a drop fall or a manufacturer's defect in the assembly process when these were done off the production line, and we have warping to this board that has resulted in its ultimate failure. The question is whether or not that warping has then caused that chip to be non-repairable, or if it can be taken off and reballed. And allow me to take this moment, and again, I know this is starting to get long, so it's going to come to a close, but there's plenty of talks out there about how reballs are bullshit and they don't work. Well, two things to that. One, in the game console arena, there is no alternative. Two, reballs, at least from my opinion and my experience, they either work or they don't. And if they do work, they work for pretty much forever. I think I have had one where it actually didn't even leave from my possession before it failed. It failed within 4 days. So as it was going through its burn-in testing, that chip went out. So it was teeter-totter. No, I take that back. I've had two, and both of those were caught before they left my possession. Then I give a 6-month warranty. Now there are, I'm sure, the guys out there that'll give you either no warranty whatsoever, they give you 30 days. For a burn-in on any major work, anything board level, you should be getting at least 90 days. 6 months is more than enough to reveal any problem. And so that's where go to a place you know does good work, go to a place that will back up their work with a warranty. And then just saying they have a warranty isn't good enough. A place that has at least a long enough of a history that you know that if somebody did have trouble, it would have come out by now that that warranty wasn't satisfied. So reballs are real. Reballs do serve a purpose, but they only work when the chip is not damaged. If the chip is damaged, there's nothing a reball is going to fix. And it is very rare in today's complicated processors that you're going to be able to get a chip to work long enough from just reballing it. If the chip is internally failed, it usually, reballing it makes it worse, not better. And that is where I think the fallacy ends, is that reballing is not a viable repair method. Reballing is extremely viable, but like anything else, you can have unscrupulous people out there that do it. Now, in a world where you can replace this chip, reballing should never be the option. A replacement should always be the way to go. And the industry as a whole is working towards that end goal. And that's something called the right to repair. Manufacturers believe that you don't have that right and that you shouldn't have that right, and that if it does break, whether it's their fault or no one's fault or your fault, that you should then have to buy a new one, that repair shouldn't exist as an option. And their shoddy excuse of a repair option is not an option and shouldn't be at all. You don't get your device back when you go through a manufacturer's warranty. You get someone else's device back. The whole process that you're waiting for, let's say on average it takes 3 to 5 weeks. So you send your machine off and you mail it. Let's say it takes a week to get to them. Then they put it into a queue to be diagnosed and determine whether or not it qualifies for repair. If it then qualifies repair, you are sent notice that your device is going to be taken in on warranty, and at which point they will then schedule to have a device shipped out to you. Now, this is a device that was already repaired who knows when. The problem with that is oftentimes these manufacturers are doing things to scale. They're hiring and contracting companies to do things at large volume because that's when it becomes cheaper and more cost effective. They would not pay somebody to treat an individual machine on the spot because the amount of time involved would far outweigh the value of what they're going to get back from the customer. So what they decide to do is stockpile those and then send them off for repair and then give you back one that they've already taken care of. but that manufacturer is getting paid the least amount possible to get the work done. So if it's coming in for, let's say, it does end up needing a new CPU chip or APU chip, they will replace it. They have those replacements. They can do all the stuff that needs to be done. But more than likely, it's usually some other issue that it's getting sent in for. But whatever that issue is, they treat that. And do you think that they go over the board? I mean, they do have a system diagnostic check, which turns on in the beginning, but it does not catch everything. And if it's not reported to them, they will not fix it. They may give it a visual, but they're not going to spend the extra time to go through and probe things out and see if known problems that are kind of consistent throughout different consoles, if they are still a problem on your console. It's churn and burn. So all too many times have refurbished units come in for aftermarket repair, because guess what? You could have bought your machine 2 months ago and you sent it in for refurb or under warranty and you thought you were getting a new machine. Well, you got it refurbished. And I don't know about all consoles, but some of the game consoles have in their terms that you get 1 year or 1 use. So at the end of 1 use, which is, let's say, 2 months into your ownership, your warranty is gone. You've used it, it's done. So now you need to go buy another one or do something else. That to me is a bit insane, but that is the way that world works. And what this allows manufacturers to do is they can control the life cycle of this device. They can basically hold all the chips and determine when you will and won't upgrade. And if they do make a mistake, let's say that this issue comes out that it is a reflow issue when this was assembled, and that is what caused it. Well, if you don't provide schematics and documentation where definitive proof can be provided by third parties that say, you know what, this has been the issue over and over again with me, let's now survey other repair shops and determine what their problem was discovered to be. And you start to develop a pattern. And if a pattern can be proven, then you could hold a manufacturer liable for that pattern of failure. Well, if you don't provide information, if you don't provide parts to third parties outside of your own organizations and controls, no one can ever challenge who was right and who was wrong. And that's what's taking place in the industry right now. There's probably plenty of times where a manufacturer should have been forced to recall something on a gaming console. And we saw that issue with the Xbox 360 after it got exposed. And it was just blatantly obvious as how it got exposed, because those at that time, there was not access to schematics. That stuff really doesn't get leaked. And if it does get leaked, it's well after its relevance. So manufacturers have no incentive and no value in providing parts or information to fix these devices, because it's proven over time that it will bite them in the butt when they screw something up simply to just either meet a launch date or it wasn't fully fleshed out and thought out carefully. And keeping you in the dark is better than giving you options. But in my opinion, and I think the opinion of most of the people out there that own these consoles, is you shouldn't feel like you have no options when an event like this occurs. If this customer was to get stuck with this board, if they can't get resolved from eBay, I'm sure that they would love to know that they could say, okay, tell me what it's going to cost, and you know you can get a manufacturer certified new chip, regardless of what the cost is. We then could put together a plan of action on a quick and easy way to move forward, where we're not spending time looking for parts that we can pull from donor boards and other machines and trying to cobble something together. And that is the industry we're stuck in. So if that doesn't sit right with you, I'm going to say again, Right to Repair, and there is a website. Go to righttorepair.org. Fill out your name and information. Become I don't know what you would call that, a sponsor, a patron, an advocate for Right to Repair, and let the powers that be, whether it be your congressman, your state legislator, if you want to go and as far as send a letter to your president, you can do that. But it takes people pushing and motivating in order for politicians to react. And right now, the majority of the pushing and motivating is being done by manufacturers and by their lobbyists to say no, that giving these parts out there and giving access to the information to fix them is so damaging and so detrimental that I don't know what they believe. I think they say that it will infringe on their copyrights and their patents and their trademarks, and they must believe that somebody in another, they must be in another realm of reality that is just waiting for all of this information to get released, and they're going to start building third-party PlayStations and Xboxes that are cheaper than they can produce them. And that is just not the case. There's no way that that would ever happen. Industry of scale allows them to stay competitive and to guarantee that no one would be copying this at the price points that they're selling at, much less than what they're selling it at, because they don't make their money off these consoles. They make their money off the games. Now, they may make profit off the console after a year, maybe two, when production costs are lowered, but on day one launches, they're eating losses on these consoles. And that loss margin is getting smaller as time moves on, but they're still losing money. And that's before they even get to the point of revenue share with retailers, which is at least 15% off of those items. And then the retailer will then discount and do other promotions that probably has them losing, because the bottom line is these attract customers and they attract them in masses. So the old scare tactic of we can't release these parts, we can't release this information, it really is a defunct and void argument that needs to go away. And manufacturers need to just start playing ball, not only with the repair shops, but with their consumers, so that problems like this go away. That if a person does get scammed on an online portal where they bought this machine, that they know that they have somebody they can go to and trust and get this resolved without having to jump through hoops and hurdles that take 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And then not only does it take that amount of time, then gives them a machine that may not have been refurbished up to snuff, and certainly doesn't have any additional warranties beyond, I think, the refurbished machine from this manufacturer, and so Microsoft, and the PlayStation. I believe those warranties, once you get a refurbished, whether you had time left on your year or not, is 30 days. And that's all they give. There's a reason why they give 30 days, because you're not going to run into an issue with something after 30 days or before 30 days, not unless it was something majorly flawed. More than likely, it's going to pop up within that first 60 days, and that's just my experience. I've seen that, mistakes happen, things do occur, and if I have an issue with a repair I've made, I can rarely think of it, if it hasn't happened in the first 7 days, it has rarely ever happened in the first 30. It would usually be something that would occur later and closer to that end of life cycle of the warranty. So other than that, I think that covers pretty much everything on this Xbox One X. If you're having a similar issue, and let's say you found the solution, maybe you did go ahead and do a reball on this chip and it fixed it, post that in the comments below. I would certainly like to know. It would give me the ability to at least give a brighter gleam of hope to the owner of this device if they're not able to send it back. And I'm sure that anyone else watching this video probably has a similar interest, so they would like to know as well. That's all for this video. We're going to have more streams. I am just now really getting caught up to where I can get back into streaming. I think it's been almost a month since the last stream, where I was doing 1 to 2 a day almost every day. So I'm going to try to get back into my regular stream cycle where we've got a continuous feed of new content coming in. I maybe might have another video for the end of the day. So again, post any comments you have below. You can also click that subscribe button if you like this video and would like to see more. Ring the bell and you'll get updates and alerts when new videos are posted. And there is always something to be fixed, so there's always something to put on YouTube. Everybody have a great day, and I'll see you on the next stream.